June 24th. The NATO summit in Washington begins like any other. Suits, speeches, and diplomatic smiles, but behind the scenes, something cracks. A quiet sentence spoken in Rome 2 days earlier begins to ripple across the Atlantic: 10% is enough. Those 4 words came from Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and they just might tear Europe apart. This isn't just about taxes. It's not just about trade, it's about power. About who gets to set the rules in the global economy. And it's about whether the European Union, already stretched by war, inflation, and tech disruption, can survive another blow from across the Atlantic. In this video, we'll break down how one small country's pragmatism became a massive problem for European unity, what Italy really wants, what Trump is planning, and why the entire balance of power between Brussels, Rome, and Washington is suddenly in question. Because this time, the trade war might not be fought with steel and aluminum, but with algorithms, cloud servers, and digital taxes. To understand why Italy's 10% is enough comment sent shockwaves through Europe, we need to rewind a bit, to the return of a familiar force on the global stage, Donald Trump. Back in office, or on the campaign trail with real momentum, Trump is bringing back one of his favorite weapons: tariffs. These are taxes placed on goods imported into the United States, and Trump uses them like poker chips in a high-stakes game. Canada already felt it. When they tried to tax the profits of big American tech firms like Amazon and Facebook, Trump slammed the brakes on trade talks. Stocks tumbled, their dollar lost value, and U.S. companies hit pause on major investments. The message was loud and clear: cross Trump on trade, and you'll pay. So the European Union has been trying, for months, to build a united front, a common strategy to deal with the threat of U.S. tariffs, especially since Trump's main target is the EU's new digital services tax, a law that would force American tech giants to pay taxes in Europe, where they make a ton of money. But here's the catch. The EU is made up of 27 countries, each with its own economy, priorities, and politics. Holding that group together under pressure? Not easy, which is why Italy's sudden break, saying 10% is manageable, was like throwing a wrench into months of quiet negotiations. It told Trump exactly what he wanted to hear, that Europe isn't united after all, and if the EU can't speak with one voice, it can't protect itself. So, what exactly did Giorgia Meloni say that sparked all this chaos? It happened quietly, not at a flashy summit or during a live TV interview, but at a closed-door industry forum in Rome, just 2 days before the NATO summit. In a room full of business leaders and trade advisors, the Italian Prime Minister said something simple, but loaded with consequences. If the United States imposes a 10% tariff on all imports, Italy's manufacturing system can handle it. We see it as a manageable constraint. Now think about that. At a time when the EU was desperately trying to show a united front, Meloni basically told the world, "We're fine going it alone." To some, that sounds like pragmatism, realism in tough economic times, but to Brussels, to France, to Germany, it was a betrayal. While Meloni was downplaying the risk of U.S. tariffs, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was warning the exact opposite. She called Trump's proposed 10% tariff coercion, a threat that had to be met with total EU resistance. Meloni's comment shattered months of careful behind-the-scenes planning. It opened a rift that hadn't been seen since the Angela Merkel era. Diplomats whispered about it in summit hallways, headlines screamed about it the next morning, because this wasn't just about trade numbers, it was about whether the European Union could still act like a single power, or if, under pressure from Washington, it would break apart country by country. Here's the thing about Donald Trump. He doesn't need to beat the whole European Union, he just needs to break it into pieces. And Italy just handed him the perfect starting point. Trump's approach is simple: divide and rule. Find the cracks, widen them, and then make deals one by one, where the US holds all the cards. If they don't get rid of the nonsense like the digital tax, I'll shut down talks with the EU, just like I did with Canada. That wasn't an empty threat. When Canada passed a 3% tax on tech giants like Meta and Amazon, Trump didn't blink. He froze negotiations. The Canadian dollar dropped 4% in a week. The Toronto Stock Exchange fell. And Google and Shopify put major expansion plans on hold. European diplomats saw what happened and realized, if Trump could do it to Canada, he could do it to any one of them. Italy's "we can handle 10% remark? That gave Trump exactly what he wanted. Proof that the EU isn't really united. Suddenly, it's not just Italy. Countries like Spain and the Netherlands, who rely heavily on exports to the US, might think, If Italy's cutting a deal, maybe we should too. That's Trump's game. Break the EU into negotiable chunks, undermine their single market shield, and deal with weaker, isolated partners who have no choice but to accept US terms. And with Meloni's comment, the first domino just fell. The moment Italy broke ranks, alarms started ringing in Paris, Berlin, and Brussels because, this isn't just about trade, it's about Europe's future as a united force. French President Emmanuel Macron wasted no time. He warned that Italy's stance wasn't just risky, it was naive. He believes that giving in to Trump now means giving him the power to demand more later. First 10%, then 20%, then 50%, where does it end? France has a lot to lose. Its exports, planes, perfumes, wine, are already targeted by American pressure. Macron sees this as a slippery slope. If the EU gives an inch, Washington will take a mile. Germany, too, is on edge. Their economy relies heavily on precision machinery, automotive parts, and chemicals. Even a 10% tariff could squeeze already tight profit margins. For them, EU unity isn't a political luxury, it's an economic necessity. And at the center of it all is Ursula von der Leyen in Brussels trying to hold the line. She's made it clear, no country can make solo deals on tariffs. Digital tax policies must be coordinated at the EU level. Any tariff concessions require unanimous approval from all 27 member states. She's calling Trump's tactics disguised expropriation. In plain language, a hostile takeover, of not just trade but control. To Brussels, this moment is about more than economics. It's about whether Europe can act as one, or whether each country will start acting like it's on its own. This fracture isn't just about tariffs or trade, it's about how Europe defends itself, builds its technology, and protects its future. Let's start with defense. Italy has been trying to deepen its ties with Washington, with promises of more defense spending, deals for F-35 fighter jets, and major semiconductor investments flowing into Milan and Turin. At the NATO summit, Meloni doubled down. She promised that Italy would raise military spending to 2% of GDP by 2026. No new debt, just full compliance. It was music to Washington's ears. But not everyone's clapping. Macron is warning that Italy's coziness with the US comes with a cost. The risk of becoming economically and militarily dependent on American industry. He calls it a defense yoke. Von der Leyen, meanwhile, is pushing for green defense investment, not just bigger military budgets, but stronger EU-owned industries, especially in sectors lost to US subsidies, batteries, chips, semiconductors. And then there's the digital battlefield, the digital services tax that Trump hates so much. It's not just about taxing profits, it's about data sovereignty, deciding where your data lives, how it's used, and who gets to profit from it. The EU wants strict rules, keeping European data inside Europe, protecting AI training data, securing health and biometric info. But Washington's approach is very different. American data stays in American clouds. Full stop. If Italy sides with Trump here too, the entire EU strategy on privacy, tech regulation, and AI could start to unravel. And that's why Brussels is panicking. This isn't just a policy disagreement, it's a full-blown stress test of Europe's ambition to be a sovereign power, digitally, militarily, economically. Now here's where it gets serious. Because if the EU can't hold the line, if each country starts cutting their own deals, the whole European economic structure could begin to crack. Let's look at what happened to Canada. When they pushed forward with their 3% tax on big tech, Trump hit back hard. Talks collapsed. The Canadian dollar dropped 4% in 1 week. Their stock exchange sank. Major tech investments were frozen. Brussels is terrified of a repeat. Economic models from EU analysts warn that if Italy's breakaway triggers copycats, like Spain or Greece saying we'll take the 10% too, it could lead to a deep internal split. Germany and France might respond by building a financial buffer for their own industries, but that creates a north versus south divide in the Eurozone. Interest rate gaps widen, the ECB's safety net weakens, the euro loses value. In this scenario, Brussels fears three things: fragmented defense investment, delays in Green Deal targets, a permanent loss of credibility in global trade negotiations. This is Canada all over again. Only now the EU is the one being split into pieces. Even worse, if the Commission fails to get a unified stance at its emergency meeting, they may start offering euro cushion deals, extra green funds, or R&D money, just to get countries like Italy back in line. But at what cost? Once exceptions are made, the whole concept of EU solidarity starts to feel optional, not binding. And that's exactly what Trump is betting on. So here we are, at a crossroads. On one side, Giorgia Meloni's 10% is manageable approach, a signal of flexibility, realism, and national interest. On the other side, Ursula von der Leyen's firm call for a single European voice, a stand for unity, sovereignty, and long-term strength. This isn't just a disagreement over trade policy, it's a showdown that could define the next decade of European geopolitics. If Europe breaks apart under tariff pressure, with countries making separate deals chasing short-term protection, then Washington's divide and rule strategy will win. And the EU will face not just tariffs but digital regulation rollbacks, lost defense autonomy, and the weakening of its green transition. But if Europe holds together, if it can negotiate as a single powerful bloc, it could push back, secure fairer trade terms, and build a future rooted in collective strength. The 10% dilemma is no longer just about numbers, it's about who writes the rules of the future, a fragmented Europe, or a united one. And as history has shown, once one domino falls, others follow. Canada was first. Is Italy next? Or will the EU hold the line? Only time and leadership will decide. What do you think? Should Europe compromise to protect its economy today, or stand firm to protect its unity tomorrow? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update on global power shifts like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.